And are looking at things like PulseChain liquid loans as an alternative investment strategy. We've presented in Taipei, Singapore, Hong Kong, one presentation after another. These people have no idea. They're clueless when it comes to PulseChain. They've never heard of PulseChain. There is this Ethereum alternative that's faster and it's cheaper than Ethereum. As soon as we mention liquid loans, 0% interest, eyes light up. It's like, oh my goodness, how are you guys managing that?
Christian, it's great to have you back on the Liquid Loans channel. Thanks for sitting down, taking the time to chop it up with me. First off, where are you calling us from right now?
Right now, I'm basically attending another conference. It's the Blockchain Life Conference in Dubai. So sunny, hot Dubai, but it's been an interesting day.
That's awesome. Can you tell us how it's been being on stage at this conference?
Yeah, look, it's funny, there's been a lot of conferences that we've been attending, a lot in Asia, some in Europe, and obviously now in Dubai. I think it's very interesting to see that, look, the demographic in Dubai is a mixture of different nationalities, but one thing that's very pronounced is the number of Russians in this particular conference. So it's actually been quite astounding to see the number of Russian folk that are interested in DeFi in general. So that's been a bit of an eye-opener for me, but yeah, definitely an interesting place and an interesting attendance.
So Liquid Loans has had a presence, not only just from your presence being there at these types of conferences, but also with sponsorships as well. So could you tell me what made you guys decide to be a stage sponsor for this event particularly?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, if you think about one of the challenges for not just Liquid Loans, but PulseChain in general, is we just need to reach a broader audience and broaden our reach as much as we can. And I think Dubai is a very multicultural city, right? So it attracts people from all over the world. And I'd argue that, if you take an interest in geopolitics, there's a lot of folks leaving the likes of the UK, parts of Europe, and they're all gravitating to Dubai, which basically means that there's a hell of a lot of people that are quite wealthy that are looking to escape the traditional finance trap and are looking at things like PulseChain liquid loans as an alternative investment strategy. So from our point of view, it makes a lot of sense to be here. And this conference is, probably one of the better ones that we've attended.
So can you just talk to me about that, how it's been traveling the last couple of months?
Yeah, look, predominantly we've presented in Taipei. We've also been to Singapore. We're in Hong Kong. It's just been one presentation after another. I think you may have heard me speak about sort of our Asian adventure, and that is, it's kind of funny because Trumpy followed me, right? So I'm setting the trend for Trumpy. And, but the funny thing about all of that is these people have no idea. They're clueless when it comes to PulseChain. They've never heard of PulseChain. So it's a real eye-opener for them. There is this Ethereum alternative that's faster and it's cheaper than Ethereum. So from that point of view, it's raising eyebrows. But what's really interesting for us is the big telltale for us is, as soon as we mention liquid loans, 0% interest, eyes light up. It's like, oh my goodness, how are you guys managing that? Do you guys lend? So generally people automatically assume that we're just another centralized player offering lending in a very CeFi sort of way rather than DeFi. So they're kind of glad to hear that we're non-custodial, the community owns, it's a community bank of sorts, and people are really engaging with that aspect of liquid loans. So it's been really good. It's been a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, do you ever have to tailor your speeches to whoever the audience is for these specific conferences, whether it's more maybe traditional finance based as opposed to more of a blockchain type crowd?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always try and, because my background's TradFi, or certainly the more traditional finance space, and I always try and use language that appeals to that kind of audience, because I think there's a lot more in TradFi folk moving away from traditional finance methods and thinking about blockchain and thinking about all the various alternatives that we can offer. So using language that's simple, that people understand, that draws on some of the TradFi stuff. So one example would be, instead of calling it a vault, it's just, predominantly we're saying, hey, we're just, you're effectively locking up your asset for a period of time. And effectively, it's like having a term deposit. So you're actually depositing something and locking it up, and there's an interest component that you can actually earn by doing that. And people get it. They automatically get it. And the other thing that people get is the whole idea of you never, ever, ever sell an appreciating asset. It's the last thing you'd ever want to do. And whilst in crypto, I think unfortunately, crypto in general, even today, still attracts this get rich quick mentality, which is all about buy low, sell high. And we're almost the antithesis of that, which is, hey guys, if you have an asset that you really value, the last thing you ever want to do is sell it. So as soon as we start speaking in that sort of language, people get it. Whether they're TradFi or DeFi, it's keeping it simple, and people understand the fundamental narratives that we're putting to them, and they understand the principles. And that to me is really important. Once they've got the principle, they can't unsee it, right? And that's quite obvious when you speak to people and they say, yeah, I totally get it, I understand. And that's what we're trying to do really, is build that level of awareness so that people really understand what liquid loans is about. And more importantly, that they understand that, hey, there is this alternative blockchain that they could be using. So for us, that's how we're approaching a lot of these conferences and presentations.
Yeah. And I'd imagine at a lot of these events, you have the opportunity to speak to individuals and network and let them know about the protocol. So what would your, 60-second elevator pitch be to some of these individuals that you run into?
I think the main one is, if you have an approach that is about buying low, selling high, you're actually selling your future wealth. So taking that approach is selling your future wealth. And what you should be doing is thinking about extracting value without ever selling. So the never selling ethos and principle is very much the discussion point for a lot of our conversations.
So that was one of the coolest things for me, is just seeing you travel, is seeing all the brand representation everywhere. But how did it feel to be on stage and just knowing the logos everywhere for everybody at that conference to see?
Yeah. Look, I have to say, Token 2049, it was amazing. That, to me, that's probably the biggest of the events that we've attended. But our presentation was with Coinference X, and that audience, it was such a big audience that it was really, really compelling. So, look, a little funny story, but generally when you present at these things, you've got slides and there might be speaker notes and that sort of thing. And, I'm getting a little bit older, so I tend to forget things, right? So I've got the speaker notes. Well, in this case, the speaker notes didn't work. So I had to kind of wing it a little bit. But I think I know well enough about this particular protocol that it worked out really quite well. It's the largest conference I've ever attended. Just the number of speakers, the number of presentation stages was just incredible. So certainly I think we did ourselves proud, representing not just liquid loans, but PulseChain.
Gotcha. Now, when you're presenting liquid loans, talking about, liquid loans and PulseChain, what is one of the biggest misconceptions you think you have to clear up after talking about it in front of an audience?
I think when people hear the name liquid loans, for a lot of people, the automatic inference is, oh, do you guys lend? Are we lending? And so the biggest thing that we need to advise people is that, no, we don't take custody of any assets. We are effectively a non-custodial, fully decentralized protocol, and it's community banking. So the whole community is providing an option for people to borrow against their assets. That's probably the main one. That's the biggest misconception, is that people assume that we're just another centralized lending player.
Gotcha. Now, you are a man that people want to hear your opinion. So you're at these conferences and you're on stage speaking. And it's great to hear your perspective on everything. And I'm glad I have you here today. Now, afterwards, obviously how panels work is you get asked questions. So my question to you is, what was one of the hardest questions you've ever been asked after giving a presentation on stage?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. It was a hard question, but an easy question at the same time. And funnily enough, it actually happened today at the conference, the presentation that I gave today. And it was basically somebody said, hey, are you guys, what, is it a bit like Celsius? And I could see that the gentleman that asked the question he was concerned about, hey, is this another centralized player? So it allowed me to open up the narrative and say, hang on, guys, we are not a lending, we're not a centralized lending platform. This is all about community lending. And it's all about ultimately why DeFi is around. And I think the term DeFi is being abused a little bit by a lot of centralized players. DeFi was intended to provide people with self-sovereignty. So the question was a tough one in the sense that I could tell that this individual had been hurt by the Celsius fallout, but it was an easy one to defend because we are not a centralized player. We do not take custody of assets. And I think that was, whilst it was a tough question because I could see the pain in this guy's face, it certainly wasn't, it was an easy one for us to respond to.
Yep. And how do you think your speaking strategy on stage has changed, since 2023 and really when things started to get kicked off as compared to now, almost being in 2026?
Yeah, look, I must admit, I'll use the term frustrated, and I'll give some context to what I mean by that. So we were hosting, or we were basically supporting and promoting a stage today. It was the Never Selling stage. And we had a fairly prominent YouTuber present on stage today. And this is the traditional, speculator that buys low, sells high, talks about taking profits, taking your investment off the table. And the frustrating thing for me is I think a lot of people are still coming to crypto because they're wanting to get rich quick. That's fundamentally why people are attending. They hear of the stories of the past and they think, oh, this is a good bet. We should be going through crypto. We'll make $1 million overnight. So no one's prepared to take the time to really understand what it is that they're investing in. And more importantly, when you have influencers like this constantly putting out this message of buy low, sell high, take your initial investment off the table, whilst in principle it sounds right, the reality is it's a one in 1,000 bet. How many people do you know that have gone down that path and have lost completely? And the other thing is, and this is the thing that people forget, at least with traditional finance or the traditional markets, they close, right? There's a closing, there's an open and a close. Crypto never sleeps. So imagine being a trader of the old type trying to make a go of it in DeFi. It just would be an impossibility. So crypto in general, to take that methodology and try and apply it to this day and age, I think, sure, there's going to be people that are quite successful at it, but I would argue that the majority of folks that come to crypto now have to change their perspective and have to start thinking about it as, hey, I have control of my funds, and here's an opportunity for me to really garner some long-term wealth so long as I play it properly. And if I understand what my underlying motivation is, let's face it, long-term wealth, the approaches you take can be a little bit boring, but the reality is you're more likely to be successful taking that path than you would being a trader or a speculator thinking, oh, well, if I'm smarter than the market, and those that think that they're smarter than the market, usually the market outsmarts them and they end up losing their shirt. So it's just, that's the frustration that people are still coming to crypto with that sort of mindset. And our role really is to try and shift them away from that and to start thinking about long-term real wealth by acquiring assets that they believe in and just continually acquiring and extracting value in a conservative way so that they can extract value without ever having to sell.
Yeah. And thank you for describing the difference between a decentralized protocol like Liquid Loans as compared to something like Celsius, because my next question is, how do you feel about this current administration in the United States and kind of the global consensus now in regards to regulation? Do you feel that it's more in favor of these centralized protocols and not allowing these decentralized protocols to really have the breathing room that they need to succeed and compete? Or are you kind of happy with the way things are going?
Oh, look, I have mixed feelings because on one level, for me, the US dollar needs to remain the hegemon for the entire market. And I think the reason why there's been the stable coin, the Genius Act has come out, and it's predominantly focusing on centralized stable coins, is because if you think about it, The USDC is very regulated in the US, and I think that provides an option, a very secure option for people within the US and even outside the US. USDT has had a bit of a checkered history, but it's the predominant player, right? In terms of the total amount of market cap for USDT, it's more than double USDC, and it's growing at a faster rate. And I would argue that the reason for that is USDT backs its currency with US treasuries. So on the one hand, the US wants that to happen. They want to be able to sell US treasuries to the likes of USDC. And it also means that people across the globe can continue to use the dollar as their main form of transacting. So whilst that's a good thing, I think it's been deliberate to not really look to regulate decentralized protocols like liquid loans. And in some respects, I think the only time that we'll be seen as a niche player, right? So the big boys are going to be out there. We'll be seen as a niche player. But I tell you when it's going to make a big difference, and it'll make a difference when it needs to make a difference. And what I mean by that is we've seen what happens to centralized stable coins, right? Particularly speculative ones or ones that may do the wrong thing. As soon as you have that, you have a counterparty that can do the wrong thing. And as soon as that occurs, all trust is lost in that particular stable coin, and they're looking for alternatives. And we offer a non-custodial, completely decentralized stable coin that actually absolutely meets that need. But whilst we're a very small player, we're happy to see stable coins continue to expand and be used more broadly. But we'd like to carve out our niche in terms of, hey, we are a truly decentralized stablecoin and one that, doesn't have the risk of counterparties doing the wrong thing.
So as someone who's been interacting with you a couple times now, seeing some of your speeches at the conferences, what piece of advice would you give someone maybe watching this right now, or even that's in the audience when you're giving your speeches at these conferences?
I think that the first bit of advice is stop treating crypto like something that you're going to make wealth overnight with. It's a long-term plan. Be patient and acquire the assets that you truly believe in. So I think that when people hear the presentation, you can see the penny dropping. And, it's not unusual for me to have a number of people approach me after the presentation because they're interested and they're wanting clarification. They're genuinely wanting to understand how it all works. And for me, that's a really good sign. But the bit of advice for most people is please change your mindset. Your mindset shouldn't be about get rich quick. Your mindset should be about acquiring assets that you truly value and extracting value along the way, but never selling.
Solid advice. And just a couple, one or two other ones before we get out of here, Christian. You're at Blockchain Life at the moment. Sounds like you're at a fun rave. So awesome. But there's upcoming conferences as well before the end of the year and into 2026. So what are you looking forward to? What's the future look like?
Look, I think for us, obviously, it's continuing providing the message about what is PulseChain, what is liquid loans. There's two more presentations, one in Dubai, and then later in the year, there's presentations in Australia. What I'm looking forward to is continuing the journey. I suspect that there will already be a number of people in Australia that are familiar with both PulseChain and liquid loans. So we may find people attending the conference from that audience, which will be exciting. But at the same time, I think for me, it's just continuing to send out that message. And I guess on reflection, I think I might have made this comment once before, but Richard has built through his team a chain that we can all benefit from. But to think that Richard needs to come back to save us is a nonsense. What we need to be doing is working together across a number of different projects to continue to evolve PulseChain, to continue to promote PulseChain. It's almost better for us to do that than to be, harboring hope that all of a sudden Richard's going to come back and save the day. Look, I'd love nothing more than having Richard back on stream, providing more advice and content, in his usual style. But we can't wait for that. We've got to continue to do what we're doing because we're the community. We need to be the ones actually reaching out to broaden the community and engaging with others around the benefits, not just PulseChain, but obviously liquid loans. So that's what I'm excited about.
And can you explain how you've already done that already with liquid loans, is kind of pick up the pace, in Richard's absence and just kind of run with it and be the community?
Yeah, well, I guess, we do our best in terms of, but we're a little bit unusual in the sense that we don't, I don't come out on stream often, and obviously you're there to help promote liquid loans and also obviously PulseChain. We have a community, we have a Telegram group full of admins that are actually more than willing and able to help people. There's obviously influencers within our community that we speak to regularly. But I think the main thing is we've got to have a broader outlook. We've got to be reaching other communities. And I think we're doing our best to try and do that. And we'd urge other teams to possibly partner. Let's partner. Let's do something to really bring attention, not just to PulseChain, but to all the various projects that exist on PulseChain.
So any last comments or words of advice, pieces of anything you want to leave with the audience?
Learn some Russian. Because there's a lot of Russians here. It might be a bit dodgy, but anyway, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, there are a number of jurisdictions that really don't know much about PulseChain, and it behooves us to reach out to them. And I think there was the fellow Asian on Pulse that is doing his level best to try and promote PulseChain within the Asian market. So we're really happy to partner with him and help promote. And, we'll continue to do that. But we'd urge others in the community that can to do the same.
Awesome. Well, Christian and Joe, it's great having you back on the channel. I know you're a very busy man, so thank you for giving us the time. I appreciate it. Enjoy the music. Maybe do a little fist bumping for me while you're there. But we'll talk again soon. Enjoy it.